As much as we all like to rip on men, this is time to take some accountability.
So I'm currently single. I was in a situationship with a red pillar, and that actually is what motivates a lot of my content. I like to spread awareness against the epidemic, which is red pill men.
Okay, epidemic.
Yep.
Of
red pill men.
What is an epidemic?
It's a crisis. It's
crises.
Okay. Yes, correct.
What is the crisis?
The crisis is that red pill ideology is being spread to all of these men. Actually, the United Nations also recognizes it as a crisis.
We do not care.
Because red pill men are more likely to kill women.
You sure about that? You sure about that?
Actually, when you say red pill, are you referring to what?
I'm referring to men that are extremely misogynistic and hate women. Are you unfamiliar with what red pill is?
Well, I mean, there's a whole bunch of terms.
So are you unfamiliar with red pill?
Well, why don't you explain it to me? When you use the term red pill, what do you mean?
Okay, so the red pill movement came specifically, they're referring to the Matrix, when kind of men take the red pill and they become awakened to the fact that a lot of women are dangerous for society. What is he doing?
He's beginning to believe.
Okay.
Did you just say that the fact that women are dangerous to society?
No.
Well, that's your position.
I never said that. I said this is what men who are red pillars do.
Really quick before I have you continue with the definition, you cited to the United Nations?
Yes.
Which is incredibly biased, but okay.
Okay, what is the United Nations biased to?
Oh, there's massive left-wing bias in the United Nations. And like, for example, So for example, like they have a UN women, they don't have like a corresponding UN men.
Why would they?
What do you mean? Wouldn't that be equality?
So women have been oppressed for centuries.
Here we go again.
Are women oppressed currently?
Some may argue, yes.
In the United States?
Yes, some may argue that.
Is the red pill predominated?
Do I think women are more oppressed than my other minorities? Not necessarily.
Okay, so you're talking about intersectionality.
Yes. I think white women may not be oppressed as women of color, but if we're talking specifically about Black women, they are far more oppressed. And yes, they are disadvantaged because they're facing racism, but also misogyny.
You're a victim. Here we go, CSI.
Okay.
So anyways, but back to the United Nations being biased.
Yeah, it's
okay. So you're
biased.
telling me that the United Nations, that has a Security Council that is filled with the United States, China, and other countries, are left-leaning?
Yeah, it's if you look at, for example, the UN Women like Twitter account or like what they're doing, it's basically feminist propaganda. So feminism is more a left-wing ideology. So I would say if you're like propagating feminism, that is a left-wing bias.
Okay, so what the United Nations does, a lot of what they do has to do with advocating against genital mutilation in Africa, okay? So of women. So is that like problematic? We shouldn't fight against that?
Oh, I'm against that 100%.
Okay, so who else is going to do that work if we're not talking about the United Nations?
If we're going to bring up genital mutilation, I think it's fair to bring up the fact that actually male genital mutilation is actually far more prevalent and common.
Gotcha, bitch.
Throughout most, well, I don't know about in certain countries, but at least in the United States, for example, in many Western countries, male circumcision is completely rampant. And actually, there doesn't seem to be any sort of attention or push brought to this outside of like male spaces.
Okay, so are you trying to compare circumcision to female genital mutilation?
Yeah, well, I'm prepared to say this. So
there's a difference because as a man.
Yeah, I agree that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree that there's a difference. And I would be willing to grant, for example, like if we're comparing a one-to-one situation where like a woman has her clitoris removed versus like a fairly commonplace like medical circumcision, I'd be willing to absolutely grant that like the female genital mutilation is worse. However, there's far more instances of circumcision than there are of FGM.
Okay, so if you are a man who is circumcised, can you still use your...
Can a woman who's FGM,
can you still have an orgasm?
There's different types.
Well, so I would say, just to be charitable, for the majority of men, yeah, probably.
Okay.
However,
versus...
Okay, that's fine. However,
and then we need to also look
but
at...
you got to let me finish if you're going to ask a question. So I would at least point out that it's not always the case that circumcisions happen without any sort of side effects or even like total loss of the penis.
Oh my God.
In fact, oftentimes, yes, in some cases with circumcision, there's total loss of the penis. There's like severe scarring, all kinds of things that can happen.
Okay, so here's what I want to say though.
Yeah.
I think there is a difference between why female mutilation happens versus circumcision happens, okay? So a lot of the time circumcision happens, it actually started in religion, and a lot of religions believed that it was better, it was either cleaner, or it was a way to show some type of religious whatever, okay? Versus female mutilation started so a woman cannot experience pleasure, because a lot of the countries where you see female mutilation, they don't want that woman to experience pleasure. They don't want her to have an orgasm. They don't believe women should be having sex for reasons other than having children and childbearing. And so that is the difference. That is a key difference to note.
I mean, my understanding of the research I've done, this practice of female genital mutilation, it's actually something that's upheld by the women in these societies. And women will practice it on other women. So it's not like some evil conspiracy of men that are like holding these women down and mutilating their genitals. It's actually typically something that is both practiced by the women in either the tribes or in these societies. And in addition to that, it's also something that's kind of, there's a social pressure more so that women enact this upon other women versus some sort of patriarchal structure that is like oppressing women into getting FGM.
So she came in guns blazing. Red pill men are an epidemic. She says they're more likely to unalive women. Doesn't share a source or any percentages, just rhetoric in hopes that we just believe all women. But what I do know is lesbian and bisexual relationships have the highest domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking rates. At a 61% clip, you're the last person that should be talking.
A lot of people in specific countries aren't necessarily as educated on that, and so they may feel that way. But I do agree with your point that it may not be only the men. Like, men are these monsters that are forcing women to get mutilated. But I think a lot of the causes for a circumcision versus mutilation are different, and we need to look at the root causes for that.
Do you want kids when you're older? Or?
I don't know.
If you were to have sons, would you have them circumcised?
It depends. I would look at the health benefits. I would look at how it would affect them when they grow up. And then I would base it off of that. I would want my kids to live a long, healthy life. So whatever would allow them to do that, I would do.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm prepared to say like FGM, and just to be clear, FGM is like terrible and it should be completely abolished in the countries that practice it. At least as it relates to the United States, though, FGM is completely, you can't do that. You can't do FGM. It's a criminal offense. Here, it's like a routine medical practice when there's a newborn boy.
So you feel that it harms those children to be circumcised?
It does. Yes.
It does not.
I think
it doesn't harm my child.
I mean, there's varying levels.
I think it does.
It doesn't.
But they're in pain afterwards, aren't they?
I mean, there's a whole bunch of different arguments. Like, for example, like you're inflicting a psychological wound by they scream and they cry when you do this procedure. So there could be like some potential argument as to like psychological damage that could be could be done. And in addition to that, while I would be willing to grant that in most cases, yeah, you have a circumcision and your penis down the road ends up working completely fine, I would argue that there is a proportion of people who do get boys who do get circumcision who then grow up to have either scarring issues, they have trouble with, they have less sexual pleasure because that is like not to be graphic or whatever, but there's like pleasure, what's the nerves? Thank you. There's like nerves that are removed. So, I mean, they probably, still enjoy sex, but it like diminishes to some degree the sexual pleasure that they would have otherwise had.
So what do you say to religions like Christianity and other Abrahamic faiths that encourage that?
Oh yeah, I'm absolutely against it. I don't care what your religion says. It doesn't really matter. We should completely do away with circumcision. Yeah.
I think that a CT scan would show pre and post circumcision that there is trauma in the child's brain.
And sometimes they lose like part of the glands, they lose part of the head. In some rare instances, they'll lose the entire penis.
I believe that a part of circumcision, like coming into place in the first place, was because of Puritan culture. They wanted, in some instances, they wanted to remove the pleasure nerves.
Yeah, sure, that could be.
For men.
I think that could probably be the case, and I think there is some religious component to male circumcision, but I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole of male circumcision. We were relating it to the UN, and my position was just that the UN as an organization clearly has a bias against men. So I don't think it's like a particularly.
So how does the United Nations harm men? How does it oppress?
I didn't necessarily say they harm men, but I might be able to make that argument.
Okay, so you feel that the United Nations, do you feel that it should exist?
Should it exist? Well, I'm not really like a geopolitics guy, so I would have to look into the benefits like politically of having the UN or whatever. However, like I do think it's, again, not really my wheelhouse, but at least as it relates to your claim about you citing to the UN saying, well, the red pill ideology, it's like, it's a emerging, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there's this argument that the red pill is emerging terrorist threat to the United States, dangerous threat. And I think it's completely overstated. So do you feel that you yourself are a red pillar? What? You'll have to define red pill.
Well, if you are, can you define what you believe in?
Well, it depends. People have different definitions of it.
Okay, so what is your personal definition?
Well, first I would start off by saying, and I know you don't like this categorization or label either, I would say I definitely lean conservative. And I know in your notes you say you don't like conservatives. Yeah. But as it relates to the red pill, there's all kinds of really, there's really extreme stuff where you're getting into like basically like, as it relates to, some people can, like, you can be red pilled on like veganism. So like,
okay, but I
want to make sure we're being precise about like the term here. So when I think of red pill, you mentioned the Matrix.
Yes.
I think that that's a fair characterization.
Okay.
So I think taking the red pill, I guess spoiler for the Matrix movie. So to take the red pill means you're pulling away the wool. What's the term? When
the wool over your eyes.
The wool over your eyes. You're basically seeing the truth of the world. And there's a lot of propaganda, and I think it'd be fair to say there's propaganda on both sides. Perhaps there's like Republican, conservative propaganda, and there's leftist, liberal, Democrat propaganda. And then there's the truth. And so I believe in the red pill, it's just the truth.
He ain't lying.
So, and if those truths tend to be uncomfortable, we accept that regardless. So I would acknowledge, like, in the sense that I've taken the red pill, I believe in truth over discomfort.
It's very easy to see why she hates the red pill. She's a liberal white woman. What do you expect? She hates conservatives and the truth. She's the type that's okay with men and women's sports, sharing locker rooms, but can't define what a woman is. Of course you're gonna hate the red pill, because when you're stuck deep down in that rabbit hole, comforting lies become the truth.
But like, if there's like a specific red pill ideology, like you, for example, Andrew Tate, some people would label him as red pill, and he's like believes in polygamy, and he believes, I'm trying to think like a good example I could give as it relates to Andrew Tate. What's a Andrew Tate red pill argument? Do you have any
so that basically men are more oppressed than women are?
Does Andrew Tate argue that?
Many people and proponents of the red pill ideology argue that. Do you believe that?
Do I think men are more oppressed than women? Perhaps in some ways, yes. And you know what? I'll bite the bullet. Sure. I can. I mean, sure. I'm prepared to bite the bullet. Sure.
Okay. So then tell me more. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So, and I think first off, it's a bit geographical related, but at least in the United States, I'd be prepared to forward this argument. This would actually apply to almost all nations, almost all states. So throughout all of human history, the story of feminism is women have been oppressed, women have had it worst, men have had more privileges, men have had all these positions of power. Men were the oppressors, women were the oppressed.
For sure.
Well, I kind of dispute that. And I think that perhaps you can make the argument that throughout all of human history, a very, very small proportion of men did have power. But I wouldn't say those men had power because they were men necessarily. They just happened to be from a long line of people who already had power. So power begets power. So I don't think it necessarily has to do with the fact that they have a penis and that they're men. This seems to be quite a bit of an oversimplification of really like complex power structures that exist in society. Because I would just point to the 99% of both men and women who had absolutely no power through human history. So this idea that, well, men as a group, and let me just ask your position on this, are men as a group the oppressor class?
It depends. It is a lot more nuanced than that. I can agree with that. I think when we're talking about class struggle, that is one thing, okay? But then we're going to talk about, if we're talking specifically about gender, if we're looking at male and female, men, yes, have tended to maintain power and have held on to that power, right? So if we're looking at, for example, the Bible, okay? And something that's been there since people can cite it people have been citing it from the beginning of time, okay? The Bible in itself has misogyny in it.
Why?
Right? So if you're looking at the Adam and Eve argument, men have used that for centuries to oppress women, saying that women caused original sin, women are the root of all evil, Eve took a bite of the apple, so it's women's fault, okay? And that has really led to so much misogyny that is at the hands of men wanting to oppress women.
You serious?
Wait, men want to oppress women because of
their faith.
Bruh.
Potentially.
Because of the original sin?
Potentially. I've heard that argument multiple times.
Well, so just to be clear, I'm not going to forward any religious arguments. I'm agnostic.
Okay.
Although I do have pro-Christian sentiments.
So, yes.
But I'm not going to have a theological debate with you.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we should have a theological debate.
Are you religious? Are you?
But I am not, my religious beliefs don't necessarily bleed into my political beliefs.
Are you religious then?
In my personal life, yes.
What, are you Muslim or?
Yes.
Okay.
But I will say, this is what I will say. I will say that a lot of Christian ideals bleed into, yes.
If you don't mind, really quick, just on you're Muslim.
Yes.
Do you think Islam is less oppressive than Christianity?
I think that the media wants to frame certain narratives. I think if we're talking about religion,
sure,
a lot of times religion can be weaponized against women and used to oppress them. Okay? And if we're talking about the West, of course the West is going to want to frame Islam, whatever, as oppressive, this, and that. Am I making the argument that Christianity is more oppressive than Islam? Not necessarily.
but I mean, I don't think it's just media framing. So I mean, we have, for example, Islamic doctrine that we can look at.
Okay, let's talk about that. What Islamic doctrine is oppressive to women?
Oh, well, I mean, again, I'm not a theological expert, but what I could point to, for example, like I think in Muslim majority countries, you tend to see less freedoms for women. So if you look at most Western countries that are either Christian or have like a Christian heritage, women have like really robust freedoms in either Christian countries or
so what do you define
Christian
as freedoms?
Huh?
Sorry.
Oh, sure. Like ability to vote. Well, I mean, like, for example, do you think United States is more, at least as it relates to women, is more free than like Afghanistan, which is a Muslim country?
Yeah, but like in what regard? So if we're talking about women owning land.
All of them?
Like currently?
Yes. So if you're going to say, so are you saying that freedom equates to how women get to dress? Or are we talking about right to own land, etc.?
You think the only restriction on women's freedom in Afghanistan is their dressing ability?
No, I never said that. I'm just asking you to define freedom. Freedoms. Like if we're talking, so if we're talking about, for instance, Saudi Arabia versus if we're talking about Afghanistan versus if we're talking about Iran, it's all different.
Okay.
Let me get this straight. She's a Muslim woman with a white liberal woman's mind that can't tell the difference between which type of woman has more freedom, the Christian or the Islamist. How can we take you seriously when you don't argue in good faith? Lady, you got a battle going on inside that's pulling you in two different directions. Pick a side. You can't serve two masters.
That's what I call a chain reaction.
Manifest my own destiny. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, the perfect recipe. May they remember me, my words will live on. I'm guided by an energy, a flame, hold it close to you. Check out my melodies. Is it the media that's been leading you? I'll show you a thing. Misdirection, what's the message? They don't want you to win.
As much as we all like to rip on men, this is time to take some accountability.